Welcome to Politically Georgia. I'm Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy. Hey, Patricia.
Hey, Greg.
Well, State Senator Elena Parent has been a fixture under the Gold Dome for years, not only as a Democratic state senator from Atlanta, but also as one of her party's most influential voices in the Capitol. She's helped guide Senate Democrats through a lot of bruising policy fights, years of divided power, and the constant challenge of what a minority party can actually achieve in a Republican-controlled legislature. Now, as she prepares to leave office, she joins us with a perspective that goes far beyond just a routine retirement announcement. We're going to talk to her about what she's learned trying to lead from the minority and what her departure says about the broader challenges and opportunities facing her party in Georgia. Senator Elena Parent, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Patricia.
Hello.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Well, let's start with this. You've spent years under the Gold Dome as one of the most prominent Democrats in the state Senate, in the legislature. Why step away now? Why is this the right moment?
You know, there are really so many reasons, but the main one is that I feel like it's time for a new challenge. As you noted, I've been in the minority my whole career, and I have so much respect for the role of the minority. It's incredibly important. But, I would say the political environment that we were living in the Senate over the last, number of years kind of did start to wear on me probably a little bit, to where there were so many bills that we were contending with that were really just for, someone's primary talking points. And that really started to wear on me. Most importantly, Georgian's time, but also eventually my time, was kind of being honestly wasted, and that I could maybe make a difference somewhere else. And it just comes to, how many more chapters do I have in life, and what do I want to do with them? And I've loved it so much, but it's a significant commitment. And I've done it, and I'm ready to do something new.
When did you make your decision? Because you made your announcement during qualifying period, after a few days into qualifying, which made some people think maybe this was not a sudden decision, but something that you had not thought about or decided going into the session. Tell us about when you decided and why you announced when you did.
Right. So, I'd long thought about what would be the right time. And some of that, in my mind, I'm thinking about the ages my children are. I've got a 9th grader and a 7th grader. And I think high school is a really critical period, right? All periods are critical, but to me,
It's extra critical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, when they were younger, they would go to bed early.
Yes.
Well, they don't do that anymore. So it's harder to be out on
have the
weekends.
same age kids,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. And then the homework is a different thing. Just all of it, right? Like life situations that are a little bit more regular and fraught maybe through those middle and high school years, right, than maybe when your children are small.
Yeah, and my friends have told me who have older kids, they're like, their kids, they felt like needed them more in junior and high school than when they were little. And that came as a big surprise to them. They thought they would be like shifting up into high gear in their career. And then they felt like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
No, that's exactly right. And I always had planned for that to be my reality, to be honest. Like, I had advice from some people early on. I remember one high-powered lawyer telling me, she was like, well, when they were little, anyone could help and put them to bed. She's like, now they need me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so that had always kind of stuck in my head. And I also saw that sort of play out in my life. So that's certainly part of it. So I'd been for a long time thinking that this sort of sensitive period was one where I wanted to be able to be a bit more available with more certainty. Because another thing, as you both know about politics, is that it totally takes over your life because it is in some ways unpredictable. Even with a job like ours that is supposed to be part-time, but really is not and probably hasn't been for a number of decades, right?
It's anything but part-time.
Anything but part-time. And you're also well aware. It's not about the money, but as the job grows more and more, and I feel like, certainly by certain decisions that I chose to make, such as running for caucus chair, but also length of service. You collect people, you collect issues, you collect responsibilities. And with all of the changes where social media and digital become more and more prominent and important, in terms of messaging and communications, that's then a whole other responsibility that, you don't have to do.
Yeah.
But it's part of modern political life. And it's truly amazing how much effort and staffing and money and all this need to go into these state legislative jobs that are supposed to be part-time and pay, I think we're at like $22,000 a year, right? It's kind of remarkable that it's got this operation.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, just the growing duties and just also the growing competition under the Gold Dome for some of these jobs. You mentioned you've always been in the minority for as long as you've been in state elected office. What does leadership actually look like when you are trying to affect the agenda from the outside, when you don't control what bills get voted on, what bills get through the General Assembly?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I stayed as long as I did is because I was really excited about the work that I was helping to do to grow our caucus, to professionalize our caucus. And that had been a project ever since I was elected, right? But we were and are being able to accelerate. So I actually stayed probably a little bit longer than I might have. Although I will definitely say, I'd kind of thought maybe I would retire after this year. Brooks is a freshman, as I mentioned. But then, you have those moments. I'm in session. It's like the adrenaline's going. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe now is not the time. So I did kind of waver back and forth to the end to finish answering your question, Patricia. But yeah, So I think that the Democratic Party in Georgia, not just at the party level, but also at the caucus level, et cetera, had gotten to like a sort of atrophied situation because we had lapsed into sort of the super minority. So then you're kind of not on the radar nationally to be bringing money in. And there were always, as you guys know, flashes of, well, maybe this candidate, Michelle Nunn, or, is going to be able to Stacey Abrams, of course, there was a significant change. But so for the first part of my tenure, it was like, all right, we have a lot of work we need to do to build the staff, fundraising, campaign communications apparatus to really be able to compete for a majority. But no one really saw it as being around the corner, right? That changed to a certain extent in 2018. Maybe it wasn't like, oh, we're about to
But there was that sense that Democrats
Senate majority or a House majority. But yes, now it was like the world knew it was kind of more of a possibility. So yeah, I mean, it is difficult in a minority party that has not had statewide victories recently to sort of raise the money to hire the staff, to put in the work, to be organized on those fronts, right? Those critical fronts if you are going to try to be majority ready, like fundraising and staff and communications. So that's been a real building operation, and I'm really, really proud of the work that has been done along the way. Obviously, I need to give a big shout out to Gloria Butler, right? Liz Flowers,
former
with our
Senate
caucus
leader.
forever, yes.
Yep.
Harold Jones, who's been kind of my partner in many ways. We came in together, and Ross Harris, who succeeded Liz, although now we have more staff. So now there's more staff campaign side and communication side versus sort of whip policy side. But in terms of being in the minority, one of the challenges for us is that they know what's coming, but we don't, right? So trying to get on an offensive agenda has been something that we're talking more about. Here are the issues that we want to press. Here are the ways that we want to be able to do it. And that's got to obviously involve a communications plan and everything else. And inevitably you start to get to the part of session where everything's crazy anyway, and there is so much coming at you that you're always in sort of reaction mode. And the thing is, your voters and also groups watching the Capitol expect you to put a big effort into fighting things that are they or are they not something to actually worry about, right?
They expect you to be on top of everything.
Yeah, and let's talk about life in the minority for a Georgia lawmaker and the time that you've been there. Republicans have passed significant abortion restrictions. They have passed significant gun rights expansions, religious freedom, the entire Stop the Steal chaos when you were on national TV quite a bit, having the spotlight on you. How has that been? Do you feel like you've been able to be effective? Or when you look back at that record for Republicans, do you feel like it's been time well spent for you?
Right. So I do really, really respect the role of the minority and the voice of the minority. I mean, we know, and my colleagues and I know that we represent millions of Georgians, not just with the seats that we have, but with those that people that are in Republican-held districts, and even with maps as they get drawn and gerrymandered. We know it's more people than you would necessarily know just looking at the split, right? So we take that very seriously. The minority is also critical to holding the majority accountable, right? And that is why you need more than one party. Otherwise, you lapse into total extremes and authoritarianism and everything else. So all of that matters a lot to me. Now, in terms of policy wins, we have certainly had our policy wins, but I saw pretty early on that legislative wins are hard to come by when you're in this small minority, at that time small. And there's also trade-offs to be had sometimes if you're trying to push legislation, especially if I'm, being caucus chair, then it's kind of well, if I'm carrying a bill, then the Republicans may see that as more leverage over my caucus, right? And so there's all those things that you have to think about when you're one of the leaders, right? So passing legislation has never been my main goal in serving, because that's just the reality of being in the minority, and especially in the minority in the Georgia Senate. A lot of the trade-offs that might have been expected of me to pass more bills were things that I was not going to be willing to do, because it was more important to me to be a strong voice without a lot of fear of they're not going to pass my bill. There are other ways to get legislative policy wins, working with your colleagues and sticking things in their bills or getting them to carry issues. And so I felt like I became pretty successful at that for certain things. But, there's no doubt that, we were not, there are issues that have lingered at the Capitol for 15 years, right? My whole time in the Senate, where we've really only seen it kind of go backward. Yeah. And is that frustrating? Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my question about that, too, is you've been under the Gold Dome for pretty much the entire Donald Trump era in national and Georgia politics.
I have.
How has he changed the culture of the debate of the Democratic response and the Republican agenda under the Gold Dome?
I always think when I first got elected, which was 2010, to the House, there was, and there still is, debate between the parties on what should the role of government be, how much taxpayer money should we be investing in transportation, education, just healthcare, the basics. Those still exist. But we veered off onto a lot more of things where shared reality and facts are no longer shared between the parties than they were when I first got elected, which really changes everything. And also, that party has been so captive to Trump, and any charismatic leader is going to have some power over the members of their party. But this is at a level that, certainly I hadn't seen.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we get into what's next, what worries her about her party's future, and the rising stars that Elena Parent thinks Georgians should be watching next. This is Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Welcome back to Politically Georgia. Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy. Yes.
Greg.
If you've got a question you'd like to ask us here on Politically Georgia, you can call our hotline anytime, day or night. Leave a question. We're going to play it back and answer it right here on the show during our Monday mailbag segment. That's Patricia's favorite segment of the week.
I love it.
The number is 770-810-5297. That's 770-810-5297. You can also email us at politicallygeorgia@ajc.com. We cannot wait to hear from you. Okay, Patricia, we're back with our interview with State Senator Elena Parent. You've been covering her, it feels like, for at least more than a decade, where she's been a fixture under the Gold Dome and a major, not just a lawmaker, but a major power player in what happens under the Gold Dome.
Yeah, absolutely, because she has been called on over and over and over again by party leaders, and then she became a party leader to really be the face and the voice of the Democratic position on a number of issues. And it's so difficult in the minority party in a state that has been so long dominated by Republicans to find new, creative, and effective ways to push back against legislation that is barreling forward, whether you like it or not. But the Democrats have needed to have somebody, and Parent has been that person, to stand up and offer kind of logical, research-based, but also compelling and personal reactions to a lot of the bills that are coming. So I think she's been really effective for Democrats, and we always look to her, for a response, for a quote, for can you put this in context. She's really been one of the Democrats' leading voices and experts down there.
Yeah, well, in the next part of our conversation, we're going to look ahead with Senator Parent. We talk about what worries her inside her own party, how gerrymandering and internal politics are reshaping both Democrats and Republicans and the policies and the agendas we see at the Capitol, and whether Georgia Democrats really are on the verge of winning control of the state Capitol.
Yeah, and let's talk about, when you look back at your time in the legislature, my memories of you have been standing up during so many debates and saying, but what about this? What about that? Because also you're an attorney. You can bring a lot of that expertise. What do you look back on as your own high points of your time in the legislature?
So at one point we had 17 members. We were in a super minority when I arrived. Quickly, I knew that I needed to be someone that was a member that would be relied upon to go speak at the well and carry argument and debate.
As a rookie.
Right. As a new member. One of the things that I have tried to do is kind of plan out so that the work can be a little bit more divided among members, right? So one of the things that I am the most proud of is when we had these sort of successive expanding classes of legislators that got elected. And we could add really talented voices to our caucus who would do a lot of the work that I needed to do as a freshman senator. And also that is so important in capacity building, right? It was like this big shifts in capacity of our caucus, talent. Like there'd always been a lot of folks with a lot of talent, but like these elections where we were able to pick up like new, fresh, smart senators, that just allows you to really take all of the facets of the job to a much higher level. And that was sort of then what enabled us to begin to build the caucus apparatus to where we have it now.
So another huge election year is coming up in Georgia. What worries you right now most about your party, right? What's the biggest concern you have as a Democrat going into this election cycle?
Well, both parties are too captive to activist bases or interest groups, right? Like we're both of us are pulled away from the broad, middle spectrum of voters, and which of course is actually not what our system is supposed to do, but that is what it's doing. And I think that's really accelerated with, the technological precision of drawing maps that exist now. That's right, which you could do before, and of course has always existed, and both parties have done it. But you couldn't be nearly as precise until we entered really this era where the technology enabled precise map drawing and also enables knowing a lot more about every single household and every single voter. And that really, yes, is a dangerous thing to be able to gerrymander precisely. And once you've done that, and you've got, very few seats that are competitive in a general, well, then you've got people that rationally are like, well, my only election is my primary. Well, the people that vote in the Democratic primary and the people that vote in the Republican primary don't agree on that many issues. I mean, they may agree on like data centers right now. You can always find a few, right? But for the most part, they're very ideologically opposed. So what does that set you up for? Getting nothing done and gridlock, and getting nothing done on things that voters actually care about. And I think that's why Americans are so angry at the system that has basically failed to deliver on things they care about over the last, 20, 30 years. And there are other things underlying that, like globalization, right? I mean, it's all part of the same sort of thing, but they're very angry because they want the system to respond to their interests better, and it's not. It's responding to big donors, maybe. It's responding to activists. It's responding to base voters. And so that is really, to me, that's the biggest challenge facing both of our parties. And you obviously see it in all right, we're still engaging with this ridiculous notion that, like, on the Republican side, that Trump won the 2020 election. I mean, it's just what are we even talking about, right? Okay, we need to move away from that. So that is their burden to bear, But we on our side is, I mean, to me, there's nothing as extreme as that. I'm sure my Republican colleagues would find something and beg to differ, but we still have groups that are still quite outside what your average person wants to see their government do, that push us, right? And they're in the building, and maybe they're donors, and they're very loud on social media, all these things that didn't exist 20 years ago. And a lot of legislators, it probably is not quite as bad in Congress, but it's still going to exist. It's just path of least resistance. Path of least resistance. And so I spent a lot of my career being in path of least resistance because it seemed like the right thing to do, especially when you're in the minority. I didn't think of it that way. I didn't think of it as path of least resistance. Later on, I realized that some of that is not great because the groups or the social media mobs or whatever are not right about everything, right? They are not representative.
Surprise.
They are not representative. And the more that we as elected officials respond to those interests that are really front and center for us, activist groups, donors, people in the halls, the farther away all of us get from actually representing the interests of the voters writ large.
You've mentioned a couple of times that Democrats have grown their numbers in the House and Senate since you've been there. We hear from Republicans, at least I do, who feel it is inevitable that at some point this kind of blue wave will catch up to the Georgia legislature and they will be in Democratic hands, the House before the Senate. Do you share that view from where you sit? Does it feel kind of like an inevitable process that's coming at some point? And if so, when do you think that might be? Or do you think that's Republicans just keeping themselves up at night?
Right. I mean, I do think there's an outside chance that the House of Representatives could flip this cycle. I think it's outside for sure. It just all depends on what the cycle looks like. Democrats have been winning special elections by bigger amounts this year than they did in 2018. So I think that probably keeps Republicans up at night. You never know what exactly is going to happen until it's done, right?
Yeah.
It's like, are we looking at a wave? If so, how big is the wave? Waves can overcome things like gerrymandering. But, say that doesn't happen. Then my big fear is, we're going to see, like we've seen, of course, this year, increased leverage of power against democracy, essentially.
Do you worry this is about to come to Georgia, a mid-decade redistricting push?
Absolutely. I think that there is going to be shifting legal frameworks, probably.
With the Supreme Court decision
exactly,
coming
with
down.
Louisiana versus Clay. So the House and Senate, to me, is a little bit more of an open question here than, obviously, the statewides are that cannot be gerrymandered. And so I do think, yes, Republicans have done themselves very little favors in having to fall lockstep in line behind a sort of charismatic but also volatile leader, right? That they have not been able to stand up to if they wanted to keep their jobs, right? So by unleashing that beast, they put themselves in a vulnerable position. But Democrats also need to focus, and we don't enough. We need to unapologetically look at, like, what does it take to win districts that we don't have right now, and make sure that we are in the position where our brand isn't so toxic that we can still do so and compete for those folks.
One last question before we wrap. You've been a Democratic star yourself. You've watched others emerge. Who are the 2 or 3 figures under the Gold Dome that we should be watching, that Georgians should be watching very closely, regardless of party, who you see as future rising stars in the party now that you are leaving your job in the state legislature, but not necessarily leaving politics yourself?
There really are. There's so much talent. I mean, we've got some excellent recruits this cycle And I could see some of them being kind of the next mantle of leaders. I could really see Tanya Miller playing an important role going forward. Obviously, she's running for Attorney General right now. I think she's got a ton of talent. Kim Jackson has a ton of talent. You know, she'll have to decide where, with her little boys and everything, all of this fits. You know, interestingly, in the Senate, a lot of our talented, newer, younger folks already decide to run for higher office.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that they, if win or lose, right, their political careers here in Georgia may not be done. Another person that I feel that way about is Jason Carter, my good friend. I think that he's still young and still has always has had a lot of political talent. It'll be interesting to see whether he decides to hop back in. And it's definitely not something I'm ruling out for myself. I just know that I've done this role for enough for right now.
Stay tuned. Senator Parent, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Politically Georgia. If you enjoyed what you heard, please follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform and share Politically Georgia with a friend. It really helps others find the show and connect with our conversation. We'll talk to you next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thanks for listening to the Politically Georgia podcast. Our executive producer is Shane Backler. AJC's head of audio is Sam Stamler. Production support from our partners at Goat Rodeo, including Kara Schillen, Hazel Hoffman, and Max Johnston. For more of our political coverage, visit ajc.com/politicallygeorgia, and we invite you to support local journalism by subscribing to the AJC. Join us again next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.